let's start with how you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. We're in the midst of COVID-19, and I've been shelter in place for a few months now. But I've been okay. I've been okay. I'm very, very happy. A lot of great things have been happening, but I'm just trying to stay just very mindful at this time.
Mindful. What a great word. Every day, let alone in Mental Health Awareness Month. For somebody who's been very open around mental health, when did you first understand what that phrase even meant?
Mental health. I would say probably towards the later end of my freshman year of college when I was at the University of Oregon. I knew I was kind of like in a funk during that time. I redshirted for the first time. And during that time, definitely football was just a huge, huge component of who I was. And then one time, someone in the medical staff like just saw me and was like, "You're acting a little different. What's going on?" And then they're like, "Do you want to speak to someone?" And I was like, I didn't know much about that. And then I did. And then that was when I found out about just like mindfulness, mental health, found out what depression was. And then I started doing some more research on my own, and I just had no idea. So I think the first time I got introduced to it was my freshman year in college.
You think about that moment and that person on the staff who noticed that you needed something and then came to you. I mean, what do you think, A, did that do for you? And B, have you tried to be that person for other people now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because she was actually the first person to really just pay attention and to really just address it and call it out. I'm pretty sure other people, kind of noticed that I was probably to myself and isolating myself a little bit, but she took the initiative and just pointed that out and extended a hand of help, and that's really what I needed. So it really just resonated with me, and I remember that to this day because I felt like it really did save my life because I was in a really, really dark, sad, lonely place. But yeah, and now I feel like I stepped into my purpose because I try to be that individual to each and every person that I come across, understanding if they act a little different, like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then normally people say, "Oh, I'm doing pretty well, I'm happy." Like, no, how are you really doing? Just taking a level deeper. So that's definitely the type of person I'm always trying to be.
Okay, so for someone who has dealt with mental health, as you just described, and also dealt with injuries as a football player, how do you feel as though the conversation has changed, if it has? If I have a shoulder injury, I can say, "Hey, my shoulder bothers me," and have no problem going in the training room. But if I have mental health concerns, at least back in the day and maybe in your time, that wasn't something that was okay to talk about. Do you think that the stigma has destigmatized?
I wouldn't say it's destigmatized, but we're definitely trending in the right direction. I remember when I wrote a blog post in 2015 saying like depression, I deal with it too. And everyone was just shocked because it was just not talked about, in sports. And then Kevin Love starts, talking about his experience, and then more athletes just start speaking up about it and just being more aware about it. And I just definitely think, we made a lot of improvement definitely within the last 5 years. And I feel like if I was still playing, to this day, if I was saying like, "Hey, I'm really severely depressed right now," I do feel like the attention will be there to make sure I get all the resources to make sure I'm as healthy as possible. So I think we're definitely trending in the right direction. And it all just, sparked from just having an overall conversation, just, bringing that awareness. And I can't even imagine what the next 5 years is going to look like when it comes to mental health support especially for student athletes.
Yeah, hopefully it continues to keep going in the right direction. For some context to your story, so you talk about coming in freshman year, struggling, getting some help, getting some therapy, and then really you look at, from the outside, the trajectory of your career at Oregon was pretty incredible. You won some big time games. You obviously went to the national championship as your final game as an Oregon football player. But then you talk about in 2015, and that was, from what I understand, you signed as an undrafted free agent with the Falcons, felt
Yes.
like everything was maybe going in the right direction, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I had some shoulder injuries while I was in college. So while I was in college, I had 3 shoulder surgeries. I had a great staff, so I bounced back. Had fun, still had a really good career in my opinion. And then after, when I was with the Falcons, I failed my last physical, so my shoulder actually dislocated during my physical. And I found out I fractured my shoulder socket, just like normal wear and tear throughout the seasons and everything. And when I saw the doctor, they recommended that my third surgery. So they're like, "I recommended you stop playing football." And then right then and there, my identity again was just deeply rooted in football, especially, making it to, the NFL locker room. I was like, finally, I'm there. And it's like, this is not as scary as I thought. And like, I deserve to be here. This is fun. And then hearing that news, I had to just, relearn myself again. And that's when the second wave of the journey of self-love and mental health started.
Can you imagine if you didn't have the baseline as a freshman and
Oh.
how you would have dealt with the NFL and your career ending?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't even imagine, because even, I didn't have all the answers figured out when I was in college, but at least I developed some coping, skills. And at least I was just aware of where I needed to do research on certain things, why I felt certain ways, how to get out of, these dark places or anxious places. So I couldn't even imagine if I had to start from, ground zero at that time. And especially I had such a great support system while I was at the University of Oregon. And then when you're, detached from that a little bit, they still support me a lot, but I wasn't, a student athlete. I couldn't imagine just going through that journey just by myself with no baseline, with no knowledge. So I'm glad that I had that support definitely my freshman year.
So
You
you
said
said that,
dark places. Oh, sorry, Ash. You said dark places.
Mhm.
Define that for us.
Yeah, I would say when I define like just the dark places that I was in, just like acting outside of my character. I knew something was wrong with me my freshman year, when one day I just like looked in the mirror and I just like shaved my head for no apparent reason. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not like me. And then I'm very social, I'm very charismatic, I love being around people. And then I saw myself just, putting my headphones in and not wanting to talk to anyone and avoiding people and walking different directions. It's just like, that's not me. That's not me. Even, sometimes even briefly I had, thoughts of self-harm, and I'm like, that's definitely not me. So those, when I say dark places, those are some of the thoughts that were going through my mind at that time. And I'm just so happy that I was able to, get help in any form that I could.
you talk about depression and mental health, and it's not a linear journey, right? It's not like you get help and then you're better.
Mhm.
It's constant and it's daily, I'm assuming. So how would you describe, I mean, I know you've talked about that 2015, that blog post that you wrote, that is what helped you find your purpose.
Mhm.
So how would you describe your journey over the last 5 years or so, and where are you now with everything?
Yeah, I think my journey is it's been amazing. I've developed so much, I'll say, vulnerability, capability of being vulnerable, as well as empathy through this overall entire journey. I feel like I've gained a great sense of self. Like, I understand myself. I understand what makes me tick, what makes me happy, what makes me sad, why I feel certain emotions. And because I started from within, now I'm able to keep going within my journey and help others, in any way that I can, and to really be their support system. But I don't think that would have been possible if I didn't start within and really figure myself out first.
That's really well said. We often hear NFL athletes that when their careers are done, they're broke, they're depressed, they're divorced, they're on drugs.
Hmm.
But we don't often talk about college athletes. And there's
Oh,
like
yeah.
10 times as many college athletes who are just as depressed, way more broke, maybe not
Hmm.
divorced because they didn't get married yet,
Hmm.
but they go through those similar issues. What have you heard from college athletes who have gotten familiar with your story about dealing with their own issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, dark suicidal thoughts, when football is eventually taken away from them?
Yeah, oh, I've heard so many stories. So many people have reached out to me, especially a lot of men. Reached out to me like, this is the first time I've even heard someone speak about their journey. And especially because they say like, oh, you had a great career, I would have never known. And it just gives me just so much inspiration just to hear about your journey and your story, to let me know that I'm not alone. And then they kind of go into depth about some of the things that they've dealt with. And sometimes I even hear some of the men say like, I'm telling you things I've never even told my wife, so they're also just processing these things. But they've really, I think, just hearing my story lets them know that they can share their story, know that they can express themselves, they can be vulnerable, and they can be heard, and that this is not an obscure, feeling. A lot of people feel it. It's just a normal feeling. And I think that's just what takes the big burden and that big weight off of their shoulders, is just to be able to voice how they're feeling, voice what they're going through, and also be heard. I think that's just the biggest thing that they want, and know that everything's going to be okay.